students. So I wasn't expecting to be recording a lecture in an airport, but here I am. I'm unfortunately not able to be with you today, but there's a couple things that I wanted to go over before we get to the review tomorrow for the test coming up on Thursday. So make sure that you are completing your concept outlines and add these couple of last things that we definitely need to touch on. This you should all have. This slide, I can't wait to talk about this. This is really more in period 4, but I do need you to understand that the expansion of slavery in the South impacted a lot of abolitionists and abolition societies in the North, and there is a growing tension between slave states and free states. This picture up on the top left, there is a guy named William Lloyd Garrison. We're going to talk about him a lot. The woman on the right, her name is, I can't think of her name now. She wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. It'll come to me. The Grimke sisters are on the bottom. We're going to talk about all of these figures a lot in the next period, but I want you to know that this is kind of increasing here. Neither of these you have to put on your concept outline. They're not entirely important. Just remember that there is an expansion of slavery happening. I'll mention 2 of these figures. You can put both probably the growth of nationalism and maybe like people like Benjamin Banneker or John Trumbull, maybe put them both together on there. And it's this idea of national identity. After the Revolutionary War, ideas about national identity increasingly found expression in the work of art, literature, architecture. John Trumbull is a famous painter, artist. He's the one who did this signing of the Declaration of Independence. You can see that picture up there on top. John Trumbull painted a lot of very famous works. If you remember, there's a picture of George Washington standing there kind of next to his horse. He's kind of got like his hand in his pocket. That's a John Trumbull painting. You can see quite a few in the Capitol building that John Trumbull had done. So he's a famous painter of these kind of national identity works of art. Benjamin Banneker, that man there pictured below next to the flag there, he was a free black man living in, I want to say, Maryland, and he becomes, I would kind of say like maybe pen pals with Thomas Jefferson, and tries to urge Jefferson, who is a landowner but doesn't look at slavery as like he looks at it as an economic thing, not a moral thing. And Banneker is trying to get in Jefferson's ear and say, listen, Jefferson, like you need to think about the rights of all people. Like if you wrote in the Declaration that very last line, if that all men are created equal and deserve, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then you got to believe it, right? And so Benjamin Banneker is one of these figures that is emerging in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And then we have this idea of this growth of nationalism. We have a United States flag that's being created. By the way, Betsy Ross probably didn't, do the first one. But we do have things like this identity that's coming together. We know about the March of the Paxton Boys. You should have heard about the Battle of Fallen Timbers. I'm going to go through that one. You should have heard about the Whiskey Rebellion and the Regulator Movement. These are all things that are kind of happening after the Revolution. Okay, this is the one that I really need you to know. And I really want you to study this map right here. So as settlers moved westward during the 1780s, Congress enacted the Northwest Ordinance for admitting new states. The ordinance promoted public education, that's a big one, protection of private property, and a ban on slavery in the Northwest Territory. So the Northwest Territory are considered these 5 states right here: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And remember, so now we're crossing, right? We have the Proclamation of 1763. Well, now that's done. gained all this land after the Revolutionary War from Britain, and now we feel like, okay, our populations are exploding and we need to move further west. So now we come up with both the Land Ordinance of 1785, but really more the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is more robust and complex. Now, think about this date here, 1787. We don't have a constitution yet. Like, we're in the middle of it, and so this is still technically falling under the Articles of Confederation, and it's a pretty interesting one that they have included. So two big things I really want you to know about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. It's concerning these areas in the Ohio River Valley: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and it's basically saying, how do these areas become a state? So people are going to start moving here. How do they own land? How do we have public education? And public education in 1787 is like a really big thing. So, for instance, they were trying to sell off and parcel off this land. Now, remember, there are a lot of powerful Native American tribes living in these areas, so that's continuing to be a conflict because they have no part in the Treaty of Paris or anything like that in 1783. And so we're parceling off this land. Now, this is one of the way that the Treasury Department thought that they could get money back and kind of refund the Treasury in part of like getting into like Hamilton's all financial plan. However, if you were to buy like do you see that their one section is 640 acres? Well, they had to pay for it in cash. Well, and that would have been $640. It was $1 an acre. $640 in cash was almost unheard of in 1787. Like, really very few people could do it. And so then they were like, okay, well, then the wealthy people will buy it and then you'll rent it from them. And so it became a deal of like, how do people start living on this land and like owning this land? Also very important. Once these areas got to 60,000 people, they could apply for statehood, and that's a big thing. You had to have enough people living in the area, but and once you got to 60,000 people, then you could apply for statehood. You could draft a constitution, but in your constitution, the slavery would not be allowed. So all of these states here that you see were not allowing slavery to happen in those states. So people are moving there. Once you get to 60,000, then you can apply for statehood, but slavery is not allowed. That's a really big deal. I really want you to stress that, how the population is going. And now, as we get closer and closer to the Civil War, you'll understand those states had to be free states, and other states were slave states. Oh, this is a good comparison chart, like what it did. That's why I said really by 1787 it was much better. There it is. The Northwest Ordinance number 9 was the most significant achievement of the Articles of Confederation. You know, like, Articles of Confederation get 2 thumbs down. Like, they didn't really do a lot. But I would say the inclusion of banning slavery in the Northwest Territory, in those new 5 states, I think was a really good one. Is probably the best one that the Northwest Ordinance had brought out of it. Okay, so you've got all this. Don't worry about this slide. You know about Jay's Treaty, about Pinckney, XYZ affair, the quasi-war with France, the Citizen Genet affair. So this is kind of the last one that I wanted to get to. So the war between France and Britain resulting from the French Revolution presented challenges to the United States over free trade and foreign policy and fostered political disagreement. So the United States kind of takes this proclamation of neutrality, which I do want you to know that this is Washington's stance. Like, this is John Jay's stance. This is Washington and Hamilton's stance of neutrality. However, Congress really kind of backlashed against Washington because they said, okay, Washington, you don't have the power to declare war. That's Congress's job. How do you have the power to proclaim neutrality? And so it was a big deal, especially for those who are, like the Democratic Republicans who want to be friends with France and side with France during the French Revolution. Okay, so Washington gives his farewell address. Now remember, he's president for 2 terms. He doesn't want to be looked at as like a dictator, another king. He runs for 2 terms, and he makes his farewell address. Now this is not a public address, it's actually a written address, but in it, when he's basically saying, signing off, I'm out of here, folks, good luck, it's all yours, he has 2 real main points. One, stay out of European affairs. Like, don't get involved in European affairs. And that is really important. I'd like you, I don't know why number 2 is not bolded. I'd like you to write down number 2, stay out of European affairs. You need to know that after this period, we did enter a pretty long stretch. We're going to not talk about the War of 1812. We entered a fairly long stretch of isolationism, where we were really like, we're just going to figure this out ourselves, and we stayed out of other European affairs. And he also cautioned against factions. Well, a little bit too late, because we have already seen now the split between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. We're seeing faction. He said, don't have political parties. Well, we already have political parties, but Washington, in his farewell address, is saying it's going to tear us apart. Don't do it. It's 1796. He sees what's going to happen, and Washington says, don't form factions, don't form political parties, and we do, and it's a problem. So the last thing then I would like you to do, after you have listened to this and taken some notes, is just kind of go through your concept outlines and try to like divide up. So that we have these themes: bagpipes. B is for beliefs, like our beliefs and our identity. A is for America in the world. G is for the geography. P is for political powers. I is for, that's identity, so it's very kind of similar to our beliefs. The next P is for foreign policy. And E is for exchange and trade and work. So kind of go through your notes and see if you can think about, like, okay, what some are these topics that would fall under say beliefs, for instance. Like, well, we have this idea of Republican motherhood, or like political parties. We're seeing now the emergence of the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. America in the world. We're talking about things like the XYZ affair and Jay's Treaty. So kind of go through your notes and see if you can figure out. So remember bagpipe, BAGPIPE, and think about if you could kind of brainstorm concepts that would fit into each of those themes. So I'll see you later. I'll be with you tomorrow, and until then, bye-bye.